Hello and welcome back to Grace Peaks. This is episode 18. It has been a while since I made an episode because of the plague, and I just didn't want to do it over the summer, and I got kind of busy with work. But yes, I am back. We finished last time with kind of a joking video about 420, but before that, we did all of the gods and Asclepius because the plague hit. Yay. I'm back on campus. Everything's been going pretty well. So yeah, I'm happy to jump back into it, and we are jumping back in with heroes, which are arguably way more interesting than some of the gods. I'm not gonna say who, but I have my opinions, if you can't tell. So we're starting this week with not only just the concept of heroes at large, but also my favorite hero and my favorite monster, Perseus and Medusa. I could talk about this myth for 15 million years if someone let me. And I want to do my doctorate on it eventually. So yeah, it's going to be fun, and I'm going to talk your ear off. Going into just heroes in general, the word hero is of Greek origin. If you transliterate everything into a Greek text, all the letters are there. So the concept of the hero starts with the Homeric hymns and the epic poetry, so the Iliad and the Odyssey. And the Homeric hymns are hymns to mostly gods, but there are a couple hymns to these heroes called the Dioscuri, which are the brothers of Helen of Troy. So it starts out as a noble, highborn male that's alive. He's a good fighter, and after the 8th century, so after coming out of the Greek Dark Ages, heroes are all dead. So a lot of the heroes that we talk about are set place in the Mycenaean era of Greco-Roman history. So that means before the 1100s, before the Bronze Age collapse, and then there's the Dark Age, and then there's what we think of as ancient Greece. So they usually die in violent or early ways. I can only think of maybe one person who doesn't have a really bad death story. So Perseus is the only person I can think of, and we know there was plays written about him, but none of them have lasted, so there might be a play on Perseus that he dies in some terrible way. But I really hope not, because Perseus is my favorite. So there's this concept called hero worship in the ancient world. Great people from the past deserve the attention and deserve worship kind of ideal. Alexander the Great actually goes to give honor at Achilles' tomb when Alexander crosses the strait between Greece and Turkey. So hero worship kind of surges with the release of the Homeric epics and the rise of literacy. Hero worship also expands to the dead and past memory, so kind of how we idealize people who died on 9/11 or people who died fighting in the Revolutionary War, something like that. So after the Marathon Battle in 492 BC, the Battle of Marathon is between the Athenians and the Persians, I want to say. Yes, it's between the Athenians and the Persians. Athenians who died in that battle are recognized as heroes coming on. So Perseus and Medusa, getting into that. It's not the longest myth. See the Hercules episode when that comes out, but it is up there. I guess I'll just tell this, just the FYI, the formatting of these is gonna change a little bit because we're gonna start focusing on heroes, and I'm gonna do a 14-part thing on the Odyssey, and probably the Iliad too, because I've read both of them and they're both really good, to be honest. But the format's just gonna change because you're gonna discuss heroes in a way that's different from just discussing the gods, just in general. Perseus's grandfather is this guy named Perseus, and he's the king of Argos, and he is okay, am I gonna have a son? Because he has one adult daughter named Danae, and she doesn't have any kids. And of course, the Greeks want a male heir so they can take over the throne. And so Perseus goes to the oracle and says, hey, am I ever gonna have a son? And the oracle says, no, in fact, your daughter is going to give birth to a kid that will someday kill you. So Perseus kind of freaks out, as you do, and goes home, builds Danae either a tower or an underground bunker kind of thing, puts her in there, tries to kill her. Which the reason he doesn't, well, I'll get to that in a second. So, he's thinking, okay, no food, no water, isolation, she's gonna die. And so, a couple months pass, and suddenly all the guards are hearing babies' cries from the structure. And Perseus goes in there, and he has a grandson. And Danae explains that one night there was a shower of gold coming through the window, and she got pregnant. Which, brownie points if you guess shower of gold is Zeus in disguise. So a shower of gold is the only thing that would fit through the bars of the structure, and kids is Zeus. The kid is the son of Zeus, and not surprisingly, kid's name is Perseus. So Perseus freaks out because the kid is destined to kill him, and throws the son and mother into a ship or some sort of chest, and throws them out to sea. And Perseus is like, okay, they're gonna die by exposure or whatever. But they survive, and they come up on this little island named Seriphos, and are taken in by an old fisherman, and they go on life, and Perseus grows up into this young, strapping young lad. But the problem is, King of Seriphos is this guy named Polydictes, and he thinks Danae is really, really hot. And so the problem is, Perseus, every time Polydictes is like, hey, you're cute. I mean, he's probably a lot more creepy than that, but anytime that Polydictes tries to make a move on her, Perseus kind of is guarding Danae like a guard dog, which is apt, because the last person Danae slept with is Zeus. So Polydictes is like, okay, I need to get this kid out of my way. I can't kill him, because then obviously Danae will never want to be with me because I killed her kid. So he comes up with this plan that, even though this person is kind of a giant jerk in this myth, I like the way he thinks of this. Is he says, okay, I'm going to tell the populace that I'm getting married to some other person, to some other princess, and everybody has to give me a gift. So this happens, and Perseus shows up empty-handed because he's really poor. And he's 15 at this point, so just FYI, take that with a grain of salt. Take that with the emotional and mental maturity of every 15-year-old boy. So Polydictes starts kind of giving Perseus, crap for not giving him a present. And Perseus, in his infinite wisdom, says, okay, I'll go get you the head of Medusa. And Polydictes is like, sweet, this kid's out of my way, because there's no he'll come back alive. Take note of that, because every single time an old man has a problem with a young man in mythology, they get sent on some quest that they're probably going to die on, because then the older man doesn't have to kill. So Perseus is like, okay, I'm on the hook for Medusa's head, let's go. So Medusa, if you don't know, is my favorite monster. I am a massive nerd about her. I love her. Just classics things. And Medusa has a very, very sad backstory, because she, in some versions, okay, so there's this Roman dude named Ovid who writes the Metamorphoses, and every story that he tells in that book has to do with some sort of transformation. So in Ovid's version, she is a priestess of Athena and gets raped by Poseidon, and Athena turns her into this monster. And there is debate on whether or not that was a cool feminist thing that Athena did, or a, retributional goddess, smitey thing. I fall on the more smitey line, just because I know the Greek gods are super, super petty, but I do like the romanticism of the feminist idea of, you literally have to turn people to stone, so, what happened to Poseidon with Poseidon can never happen again. In Ovid's version, she gets raped and turned into a gorgon by Athena, and whoever looks at her turns to stone. And which is continual with the non-Ovid version, but the difference with the non-Ovid version is she was born that way. And she has two sisters, There's 3 Gorgons, 2 are immortal, one's mortal, and Medusa is the mortal one. Medusa either lives alone or with her 2 sisters on this island in the middle of nowhere, in some desolate part of the Mediterranean. So Perseus is like, okay, I don't know what I'm going to do with this, and starts praying to the gods. Well, two of them hear him. One of them is Hermes, and one of them is Athena. And Athena says, okay, you're going to need stuff to do this. Gives him her shield, which is polished, so it's like a mirror. Take a note of that, it's going to come back later. And a sword, and in some instances, Hades' Helm of Darkness, which if you put it on, you turn it invisible, and you turn it into darkness, basically. And Hermes gives him a pair of winged sandals. But nobody knows where the Gorgons live. So Perseus and Hermes have to go to these women called the Grei, who are these old women. They're kind of gods. I know they're immortal, but they're not really gods of anything. They kind of just show up in this one instance. But they have great knowledge, and their most important aspect is that they have one tooth between the three of them, and they have one eye between the three of them. And so Perseus studies this for a second, and as they're passing the eye around, he goes in and steals the eye from them. And, they're freaking out, and Perseus says, I will give you the eye back, but you have to tell me where the Gorgons are. And they tell him, and he gives them it back and flies off. And so Perseus then goes to the island of Gorgon, and he gets to the lair, and he starts taking steps backward into their lair. Because if you fight Medusa head on, it's gonna be your undoing, because you can't look at her. But if you look at her through something, like a shield, then it won't work. Like, her petrifying gaze won't work. Which, I don't know. Like, obviously it's a story, they needed some way for him to, do it, but it's just an interesting idea of, Perseus probably didn't know that was 100% going to work. And also, this kind of comes back in the second book of the Harry Potter series with the Basilisk, because it's going to kill you unless you look at it through something else. So, there's Colin Creevey and looking at it through his camera, there's that other kid looking at it through Nearly Headless Nick, so there's some mythology for you, there's some modern day stuff for you. So Perseus has the head of Medusa, and what's really interesting is the Romans used this myth to explain all of the snakes in North Africa. So as he's flying back towards Seriphos, all of her blood is dripping down onto the ground and popping up more snakes. Oh yeah, Medusa has snake hair. I forgot to mention that, but the Gorgon's pretty, ubiquitous and everything. So he's flying across, and he comes on this really beautiful young woman chained to a rock. And he flies down and is like, yo, what up? Direct quotation. And so this woman is named Andromeda, which I love that name, by the way. I absolutely love the name Andromeda. She's like, okay, my mom's stupid. She said that I was more beautiful than the Nereids, which are these ocean goddesses that are in Poseidon's court. And they complained to Poseidon, and now there's a sea monster on my doorstep, pretty much. And, and my dad went to the Oracle, and the Oracle said, the only way to do it is sacrifice your daughter. The only way to get rid of it is sacrifice your daughter. And he does it? I mean, on one hand, he has no other choice. On the other hand, dude, come on. And so Perseus kills the thing, and Andromeda, long story short, becomes his wife. And so he goes back to Seriphos with Andromeda, and he holds up the head of Medusa when he gets to, Polydectes' castle or palace, and says, King, I brought you your gift, and holds up Medusa's head, and Polydectes immediately turns to stone. Which I really like that story. Anyway, so Perseus and Andromeda are going somewhere else to go on their honeymoon, because, evil tyrants, monsters, you need a break. And Perseus hears about these funeral games, which are like proto-Olympics. And Perseus gets involved in the games, and he throws the discus. And just so happens that King Croesus of Argos is there. And so Perseus winds up, throws the discus, and the wind catches the discus just right and slams it into the side of Croesus' head and kills him. So, yeah, that seems like it's kind of out of nowhere, but there's some ideas with, human psychology of, if you have of like the new generation coming and rising and taking over. So yeah, it feels very tagged on to the rest of it. And there's this one history documentary series that I kind of like. It's called Clash of the Gods. And this is the only way that I've seen this myth told. But in that version, King Perseus comes to the wedding of Danae and Polydeuctes. And when Perseus holds up the head of Medusa, Perseus also turns to stone. Which again, I have never seen it told in any other way other than the discus way, except for that one story. So I don't know what that's about. That makes a lot more sense as a narrative to some degree, but also just the idea of like an old man getting smacked in the side of the head with a discus is very funny to me. Okay, so the reason Perseus couldn't kill Perseus and Danae, just like in our culture, American culture, the idea of killing a blood relative is like a huge, huge, huge taboo. And there were even these sort of goddess things named the Furies who their entire purpose in this play called the Oresteia is to chase Orestes, the son of Agamemnon and Clytemnestra, down because he killed his mother. Read that play. It's very good. It was a very, very, very big taboo, and like the gods would like majorly punish you if you killed your kin. So on the note of the golden shower, there is this meteorite shower called the Perseid, which looks like a bunch of droplets of gold raining down. So the thought is that the ancients looked at that, and that inspired Zeus' shower of gold. I actually tried to see it over the summer, and it was at like 2 a.m., and I was in the city, and it was really, really cloudy outside, and it didn't, unfortunately, I wasn't able to see it, and me and my friends were hanging out. But that is on my bucket list to see, just because it's so cool. Yeah, I'm a massive nerd. So yeah, if you want to look more into the story of Perseus and Medusa, I absolutely love it. Again, I want it to be what I wrote my doctoral thesis on. I think it's a really interesting one in general, and Perseus kind of kicks off the Mycenaean age. He's kind of like the first great hero. Because TLDR, Hercules is the direct descendant of Perseus, and in the Trojan War, there's a prophecy that Troy can't fall without the bow of Hercules. So, by necessity, Perseus has to be before the Trojan War. So, I want to say the Mycenaean era lasts from like 1600 to like 1100, because that's when the Bronze Age collapse was. So, I mean, it's like 500 years of this hero era. Yeah, so if you want to look into Perseus and Medusa more, which again, I would highly recommend. There's this really, really good book. I read it the summer before last, I want to say. Yeah, I read it summer of 2019. And it's by this guy named Stephen Wilk, and he's a professor of physics somewhere. He wrote an entire book on the constellation and how that interacts with the story and how it may have influenced the story. Because there's a constellation of Perseus, and I can sometimes point it out to people. That was a really, really good book. It was very dense, and there's a lot of physics stuff that I didn't totally understand, but it was a very, very good book, and it was very eye-opening to the constellation and everything, and I do want to look at the constellation more, just as a physics science kind of thing. There's also that history documentary channel that I mentioned. I am starting to take those with more of a grain of salt, because my Latin professor was on one of those about slavery, and he said that it was not a good experience, and that they would prompt him to say things, and he would be like, oh, well, we used to think that this, but now the evidence is proving that, and they would take what we thought beforehand bit, so do take those with a grain of salt. I don't have too big of a problem with it, but I know I am very low on the tier of, like, I know what I'm talking about. Like, I'm not a professor. I'm not certified in classics in any way yet. But I personally do not have a problem with those, but take them with a grain of salt. That is the episode introducing heroes and on Perseus and Medusa. At some point, just, like, pick up a book of Greek myths. Honestly, like, that's the best way to learn these. And just look at, and do read the Iliad and the Odyssey. There are ways to get them that aren't in prose. There are ways to get them in just like normal written out English. As always, if you want me to look at a myth in particular, leave it in the comments, and see you next week.